Or is that just me?
I do.
I don't think-
No, it was just me. I got it. You're good.
Okay.
Everybody see the PowerPoint, okay?
Yes.
Very
Yeah,
good.
it's good.
All
Okay.
right, so I will get started right away. So first off, thanks for the committee again for being here for my preliminary oral exam. I will be presenting a dissertation project entitled Describing and Fostering the Development of Meaning Making in First Year Composition, a Curriculum. The agenda for the presentation is as follows. I will first explain an overview of the project and the theoretical underpinnings that support it. Then I will talk some about the fundamentals of stage development theory, which is crucial for the project, and which will lead me to the curriculum itself and the description of the study, its research questions, and the methods that I will use to sample data. From there, finally, I will talk about the timeline, the projected timeline I've got, and other related plans. So I'll dive right in. The project tests the effectiveness of a first-year composition curriculum, specifically an English 250 curriculum that is informed by theories of stage development in meaning making and their complementarity with the concept of genre. The curriculum includes measures or measurements of developmental complexity at different stages of the semester. So I begin with the following premise. Genres and stages of meaning making exist in a dialectical relationship where the properties of one shape and are shaped by the properties of the other. I will unpack this statement by defining the terms to illustrate their complementarity. So, beginning with genres, Carolyn Miller, who is a defining voice in rhetorical genre studies, defines them as typified rhetorical responses to recurrent situations. For example, sharing news or simply catching up with a friend via email is a recurrent situation, and so is reporting progress to a job or even resigning to a job. Each of those situations invites or even demands a type of response. And quite similarly, following Suzanne Cook-Greuter, who is the developmentalist whose model substantiates most of this project, defines a stage of meaning making as outlining the ways a person routinely responds to events in life. So for example, somebody for whom the world is divided in clear-cut dichotomies will likely judge people as winners or losers, or say a religious belief as the truth and others as false altogether. Going back to genres, the recurrent situations invite types of responses that are more or less effective accomplishing the actions of the genre. So a love letter might not win somebody's heart if it details that person's social inadequacies, or an instruction manual for a lawnmower will not teach how to use it if it only describes how the equipment was assembled. And likewise, the properties of a developmental stage indicate what types of objects a person can be aware of and manipulate in one way or another, and conversely, what escapes their worldview. So a person for whom, for example, there is only success or failure, they might not be able to value process or distinguish a learning curve. So what does this mean in practice? The pedagogical implications, I believe, are very transparent, and the following example illustrates them. Let's consider two people, two students at different stages. Each perceives the world differently. If one can discern the demands of a rhetorical situation, she can engage it and respond to its exigencies. Conversely, if the other doesn't, he will not have a chance to even participate in the action the genre performs. So therefore, in a quite literal sense, people at different stages inhabit different worlds, semiotic systems, interpretive capacities, object of awareness, and varying degrees of agency over different aspects of themselves and the world, from which it follows, I argue, that understanding developmental levels can help our pedagogies by giving insight into the relationships students construct with the genres they encounter in the composition classroom and beyond. That is my main claim. From here, before I move on to the curriculum I propose and the study itself, a super brief overview of some basic of stage developmental theory is in order. So first off, stage theories describe human development as the unfolding of stages in a sequence of increasing complexity. Each of them affords different and distinct ways of navigating the world, organizing experience, and shaping their relationship to themselves or others. Development does not and cannot occur in isolation. It requires the interplay between the individual and the social context. Now, even though these rules and patterns have been observed in thousands of individuals, the description of stages does not constrain the uniqueness of a person any more than a language's grammar constrains the uniqueness of an utterance. So, that is to say that stages describe structural properties of how thinking and feeling might be organized, but not the content or what the person thinks or feels. Again, going back to Suzanne Cook-Greuter, she defines stages as the perspective that the individual has. The vantage point from a given perspective shapes what the world looks like for that person and how they relate to it. It's also important to say that development occurs in two directions. First, a vertical direction in which qualitatively distinct meaning organizing principle or perspective is emerges. The superordinate structure, in this graphic arbitrarily designated by a number 2, includes the perspective from the lower one, in this case 1, and transcends it, adding its own capacities and perspectives. So it follows that somebody at a given stage 2 can see and understand the world from the perspective of 1, but not the other way around. On the other hand, horizontal growth refers to changes within the same developmental level. Examples of this are acquiring knowledge and skills, meeting new people, working on one's physical health, and any activity that does not involve a transformation in one's worldview. In practice, though, as most concepts are, the division is not clear-cut because horizontal growth can be the precursor for vertical growth. In turn, vertical growth shapes how the person approaches horizontal growth. Another point, super crucial. Epistemologies are not, stages are epistemologies and not ontologies. So models, stages, properties, and rules, and any related concepts are theoretical constructs describing cognitive, affective, and behavioral patterns. A person is not a stage, nor does anybody fit a distinct stage. At the same time, however, it is also important to consider that the theoretical soundness of these models and their propositions is supported by hundreds of empirical studies. And you can find details on this claim on the prospectus. One final point in terms of the general assumptions of development. Development through stages is not like a neat climb up the rungs of a ladder that the person just performs in an ever higher direction. Instead, it is best represented as a spiral expanding in messy and unpredictable ways, and it can be invited and favored, but cannot be guaranteed. From those basics, I will really quick highlight in this slide the 4 stages that are statistically more prevalent in the student population that we serve. This is according to Cook-Reuters measurements. I know I explained them in detail in the prospectus, but I think now it's important that I just run through some of the most salient characteristics of each. So first off, the slash numbers 3/4 and 4/5 designate stages of differentiation, and whole numbers stages of integration. I will say what that means in a second. The progression goes from expert, achiever, pluralist, and autonomous. Those are names that describe certain characteristics of each. So the expert stage 3/4 is when the person begins to differentiate herself from the need to fit in. The person begins to construct their identity, but does so in constant comparison to others and in strict and narrow judgments of reality. So this stage is well captured by the phrase "my way" or "the highway." At the next stage, the achiever, the person defines themselves more in terms of their own interests and less in contrast with others. So their identity is more solid and constructed around a given frame of reference, such as scientific discourse, for example, and a belief that that discourse will disclose for them the world as it is, in their view, interpretable, malleable, and predictable, if only the right rules are discovered. Now, if I go to the next stage, these frames of reference provide the achiever with certainties, and these certainties are destabilized at the next stage, the pluralist. At this point, the person becomes aware of the contextual conditioning of discourses and frames of references and doubts the possibility of objectivity, and at least in terms that the achiever claims it to be. A common problem for pluralists, though, is that because all discourses are relative to a context, it's usual that they see no reason to privilege one perspective over another, which can lead to what Cook-Reuters calls decision paralysis. At the next stage of integration, the autonomous. The person is still aware of contextual conditioning, yet still can establish relationships between epistemological systems. So in practice, this means that the autonomous individual can value scientific discourse and at the same time relate it with the development of a perspective on colonization, for example. Therefore, more than static mental categories, the reality is organized for this individual in terms of ongoing processes of dynamic and ongoing interaction between parts, with interrelationships, organized in a complex whole where each component is defined and defines the other members of that whole complex. So in sum, I know that was a lot, but in sum, and bringing it all back to composition, different stages create different world spaces from which the student engages coursework and defines the exigencies of a given rhetorical situation or genre. So consequently, I propose a curriculum for first-year composition, English 250, as I already mentioned, designed to promote perspective taking in tandem with genre and rhetorical awareness. I apologize for this overwhelming slide. I know it's a lot, but it has a purpose, and that is to allow the committee a synoptic view of the curriculum. Each row represents a unit and its major assignment on the left, and on the right, the main content readings for the unit, and then on the columns to the right, readings, hand-picked readings that I chose, non-academic readings that are organized in terms of 4 categories that research shows are directly influencing adult development. These categories are emotional discernment, identity definition, understanding of relationships, and effective communication. You can find this chart in the assignment sheets for each of these assignments on the prospectus, so I'm not going to go into more detail for them here. So the questions that I would like to explore through the research project are the following. First, do higher perspective taking levels correlate with good writing? And I should note that the measure of good writing here in quantitative terms is the grade score or grade points that the teacher in teachers' evaluations, and qualitatively the comments that the teacher provides. The second question is more specific, exploring whether the curriculum I propose achieves better results in writing quality and perspective taking than the standard or default curriculum. And finally, I would like to determine, at least in this sample, what is the distribution of perspective taking complexity levels in the study's population. I believe the quality and quantity of the data that I will be gathering will be able to contribute not just to composition studies, but to developmental theory as well. So how am I going to investigate all these questions? First, by implementing the curriculum in at least 2 sections and having at least 2 control sections. This is a minimum to carry out the study. I am hoping to have 4 sections for implementation and 4 control sections. The participating teachers will share with me the assignment submissions, grades, and comments of the students that consent to participate, and will do so at different points in the semester. I will utilize the stages heuristic to analyze perspective-taking complexity and to establish Pearson's R linear correlation between the correlation coefficient between the stages score and the grade points in each measurement. I describe in detail the stages heuristic, and its application in the prospectus, so I will not expand on it at this point. In addition to my ratings, I really hope to recruit at least 2 raters, 2 colleagues whom I would train in the use of stages according to the procedures in the literature. They would rate random pieces of each of the data sets and establish a reasonable degree of reliability by means of the intra-class correlation value. Also, I will use Spearman's rank correlation coefficient to determine the strength of the relationship between the grade scores and the stages scores. And finally, at the end of the semester, a single frequency count will show the range of stages present at any given point and on the semester altogether. So all these measurements and quantitative data will be the basis for the qualitative exploration of what all this means and what are its implications for pedagogy. I'm gonna go through the timeline for the assignment. So I expect to have a formal progress report by October 4th and a draft of the manuscript by February 1st of next year. The other dates and important milestones are outlined in the prospectus and on this slide. Also, should I pass the exam, which I really hope I will be able to dedicate myself full-time to develop different aspects of the topic. So namely, I plan on submitting proposals to these journals and conferences by the deadlines indicated there on the right. This will allow me to use the robust theoretical and methodological framework and examine the data from the different angles of the themes that the journals and conferences propose. Another plan is to substantiate the theoretical and practical connections in the dialectic between genres and student making. So genre-mediated social action and stage-mediated individual action. That needs to be further theorized. And finally, once the dissertation results are, I have them and I have an idea of, rather clear idea of the questions and answers for the questions I pose, I hope and want to articulate a curriculum that is fluid enough, that integrates recursively developmental measures during the semester and informs and integrates stage-specific activities to have a real developmental, practical outlook and design. So that is the whole presentation, and thank you for listening.